I'm a strong, politically incorrect black man.
You didn't just win in a close race, you swamped her. You embraced him enthusiastically. Obviously, a lot of black people haven't felt that way.
He actually denounced white supremacists. A lot of minority groups that are tired of the old politics.
What karaoke song are we getting from the congressman from Southwest Florida?
Shout out to Brooke.
Hey family, thanks for tuning in to the Carlos Watson Show. Very special edition today. We have a new member of Congress who President Donald Trump, former President Trump, calls one of the rising stars of the party. His name is Byron Donalds, represents Southwest Florida, the Fort Myers area. Among other things, he's one of 2 black Republicans in the House. He's gonna be a big deal. You'll enjoy the conversation. Congressman, how are you?
Doing good, how you doing?
Good, they tell me you have a Mamba poster, is that right?
Oh yeah, it's the Mamba mentality.
Let me make sure I understand you right. You're not trying to put Kobe ahead of Michael Jordan, are you?
No, I can't do that. I respect Mike. You know, Mike's the GOAT.
Who's your starting 5?
Mike, Kobe, Shaq, LeBron, Larry Bird.
Didn't even think about Steph Curry for 2 seconds, I can tell.
No, he's too small.
You know what? You're a controversial man.
Republican candidate Byron Donalds won the 19th congressional district race, making him the first black Republican to hold this seat.
How did you get into politics in the first place? Were your parents into politics?
My family was apolitical. We didn't talk about politics, never cared about it. It really came out of the financial collapse back in 2008.
The Dow traders are standing there watching in amazement. I don't blame them.
I was working in insurance at the time, and we were trying to figure out what was going on because our clients were international. And so I was tasked with having to do the research. And when I was doing the research, I turned on the House Financial Services Committee in DC. And, you know, the members were asking questions that had nothing to do with what was actually going on. We see this albatross of a recession coming our way. And up here, people were pointing fingers. And frankly, it made me mad. It had me start to pay attention to politics for the first time.
And so your mom, your siblings, others, are they Democrats? Are they Republicans? I mean, have you brought them along for the ride?
They're still Democrats, but they're starting to think a lot more holistically about politics than they used to. When I talk to them, they're like, okay, yeah, we see your point. We see what you're saying there. It's one of those things where it's hard to, you know, even Jesus couldn't go back to Nazareth, you know. He could do a lot of things, he just couldn't do it there. That's why I call myself Jesus every day.
I was gonna say, said the man who went to Nazareth High School. I like that. So you're 29, you're watching, you're getting frustrated, you think that there's a disconnect, but that doesn't immediately lead people to run for office. So how did you end up running for office, much less winning as a relatively young man?
Byron Donalds sweeping Florida 19th Congressional District 61-38, becoming the 3rd ever black Republican from the Sunshine State to be elected to the House of Representatives.
I started doing like a lot of just my own research, reading about political philosophy. And so I started reading John Locke and Montesquieu. I read a book called The Law by Frederick Bastiat, which kind of gets away from Republican Democrat, and it gets into the purpose of law. This is now late 2009, early 2010. The Tea Party rallies are starting to pop up. And on the news, they were racist because of President Obama being in the White House. My mom, she always taught me, you don't believe what people say, you go see for yourself and make a decision. So I went. And, you know, when I got out there, the people were actually real gracious to me. They actually wanted to meet me. A lot of the things that they cared about, I cared about. So I got involved in the Tea Party movement.
The first battle for our future comes in 1 month, when we take the first step to restoring America to its founding principles.
From there, I got on Herman Cain's presidential campaign in my county back in Florida. When his campaign ended, the people on the campaign asked me to run for Congress because our congressional seat came open. So I ran in 2012, the same seat I represent now.
Byron Donalds has proven himself to Florida Republicans. Mr. Donalds has won several straw polls in Florida and continues to voice his desire to cut wasteful spending in Washington. Vote Donalds on August 14th in Florida.
I lost that campaign, obviously, but what I learned in that process really was that, you know, I actually belonged.
Why do you think you won when you think back to that race? And you didn't just win in a close race, you swamped her. You beat her pretty badly.
And I think what happened was a combination of everything. Like, I had been around the community for enough years. People have become comfortable with who I was and the things that I talked about. My time in the legislature was one of the more conservative voting records during that time in the Florida legislature. People took comfort in that. And I think the last thing about my congressional district is, we have a lot of people who retired there from all across the country. And so these are people who've done well in their lives at myriad levels, and they retired in Southwest Florida. And it's really a meritocracy. And I think that they look at it as, we just want somebody who's going to go and be successful.
And so go back and teach a class now at Harvard's Kennedy School. Why did you win that primary?
You have to get out and talk to voters. You got to knock on doors. You got to go meet people. And I think it's a combination of all that. You have to be willing to work harder than everybody else. The second thing is you got to have a message that resonates. You got to find a way that cuts through the noise, that cuts through the clutter.
Today, I'm everything the fake news media tells you doesn't exist. A strong, Trump-supporting, gun-owning, liberty-loving, pro-life, politically incorrect black man.
You're a member of Congress. You're obviously touching lots of different issues, but are there 2 or 3 that really matter the most to you, either because of your interest or because of their import or because your constituents care about them?
Well, for the district, it's water quality. In terms of, my role as a congressman, the first and foremost is just making sure that the federal government is doing the things it's constitutionally authorized to do. I think what's happened in our politics is that everybody looks to Washington or they look to the president to solve all the problems. But the way our government was formed it's actually not the case. Most problems are supposed to be solved at the state level and at the local level. And Washington is supposed to do a few things and do them efficiently and do them well. And I feel that one of the reasons we kind of end where we are in our government and our politics is that we've gotten away from that.
Let me talk to you a little bit about former President Trump, because you embraced him enthusiastically. Obviously, a lot of black people haven't felt that way, although he did grow his percentage of the black vote in 2020. But how did you think about that? Did you have any hesitation with him on racial issues, whether you thought about Charlottesville or the Proud Boys or some of the other stuff?
No, not really. And I think it's important because when you actually dig into the policies that were moving through his administration, one that gets talked about the most is the First Step Act, Criminal Justice Reform Act that he put forward under his administration.
The law applies only to federal inmates, just 10% of the country's prison population. One reason backers call it the First Step Act.
I think if you take a step back and look at things where he did continued funding for HBCUs.
From now on, faith-based HBCUs will enjoy equal access to federal support.
It was clear that the president was really trying to make sure that he was putting in the policies that could be helpful for all Americans. I think when he speaks to people, he's very abrasive and he's very upfront and he's very outspoken, and that doesn't always sit well with everybody. But when you look at the actions, the things that he was actually doing, it was actually helping a lot of communities. I'm a conservative, and so a lot of his political philosophies, a lot of his policies lined up with the things I believe in, the way I think the country should be working. When you look at tax reform under his administration, it's without question, it was a boon not only to corporate America, but to all of America.
We'll pass massive tax reform to create millions of new jobs and lower taxes for everyone.
Home ownership levels were at all-time high. People were actually really formulating wealth under the economic policies that the president brought into place. And I think the last part that people sometimes get away from is that if you go back to that audio with Charlottesville.
Very fine people on both sides.
You go back and actually watch the video. It was actually a 17-minute press conference. And the president, for the first 15 minutes, was actually describing in detail everything that happened in Charlottesville, how he actually denounced the violence, he denounced the Klan, he denounced the white supremacists.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. Even
stuff with the Proud Boys, the president never once endorsed the Proud Boys. And what you realize in politics is that you don't have much control over the people who support you.
But Congressman, if someone were to push back on you on that and say, you do have more control than that, and not only do you have more control, but you have more responsibility, and especially if you're the president of the United States, which we haven't had very many in the history of the Republic, and that if you've got white supremacists gathering and saying things and doing things that are harmful, that are despicable, that doing anything but clearly denouncing them in really clear things, like nothing else is responsible. And simply saying, I don't control them is not enough when you're the president of the United States. How do you hear that?
Let me be clear on this one. If you go back and look at the footage, the president has clearly denounced white supremacy at least 10 different times over his 4 years. Clearly denounced it.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs. including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
I have to say, I've said it many times, and let me be clear again, I condemn the KKK.
I denounce white supremacy, okay?
It's one of these things where if media doesn't cover that and they only cover the 10-second clip and ignore the other 16 minutes and 50 seconds of that press conference, then you can also shape the reality of what people see. So the thing I think is important, especially being in elective office, is judge me on my entire statement. Don't clip me and then try to set that as the narrative.
I think I'd say something different. I'd say there's certain things that I think are important enough that being right 9 out of 10 times is not good enough, right? Like when you're on a nuclear sub, you can't be right 9 out of 10 times. When you're landing the plane, you can't be right 9 out of 10 times. When you're doing brain surgery on me, you can't be right 9 out of 10 times. There's certain things in which I need you to be right 10 out of 10 times. And it strikes me that that's one of those things, that those 10 seconds matter. And that I wouldn't expect that you would say something like that. I wouldn't expect that I would say something like that. I wouldn't expect that lots of other people would. And that if someone who's got as much access to power and information, such that they're the president of the United States, I wouldn't want someone who would do that for 10 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes. And I would think that if someone did that, that would feel pretty disqualifying to me. And I wouldn't just say, well, they got the other 99% right.
Here's the only thing I would say is, if that's going to be the standard, then it's incumbent upon big media to be consistent and report on it all the time. And this is the problem we're having in our politics, is that big media is choosing what they choose to focus on. If that's the standard we're going to play by, then you have to hold everybody to that standard, whether it's Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, myself. I'm fine with it. But let's be consistent across the board.
Congressman, why do you think former President Trump arguably grew, depending on which numbers you believe, his support among black voters, either 2% or 4%, different polling? Why do you think he did?
I don't want to just put it into buckets of minority groups, but I'll have a lot of minority groups that are tired of the old politics. They're tired of politicians coming out here and saying everything, and everything is scripted and said perfectly to either pander or to make people feel good. They would rather have leadership that's just effective. And there are a lot of Americans in our country, they don't need everything to be perfectly scripted, but they need the president to be effective. They need the president to do the right things when it comes to the economy, so that government doesn't stand in the way of me pursuing my prosperity. And I think what you're starting to see, and it's not just with President Trump, you're actually starting to see this with a lot of minority voters with respect to the Republican Party, that they're looking at our policies and not just what media might say about us or what our opponents might say about us. They're looking at what the effects actually are. And they're deciding that, you know what, that's more important to me in my life than the rhetoric that might exist. And I think that's a lot of what you're seeing. The second thing I would say when it comes to President Trump specifically is a lot of people just like people who are just straight and blunt.
Congressman, what has surprised you the most about being a member of Congress?
It's really that there's not enough camaraderie amongst the members. Politics, obviously, it's tough, man. These lights are hot. You're in the public eye. You say a lot of things. You vote on a lot of things that do affect the lives of people. I do think it's important that the members actually spend more time together and actually begin to know who each other are as people. Because I think it's hard to really criticize and attack somebody if you know them individually.
How do you see the number of black men and black women who've been killed at the hands of police officers? Do you think we have a serious problem? And if so, what do you think should be done about it?
I mean, look, I'll tell you, I think it's a real problem. I think that there are police reforms that are needed. I think that, Senator Tim Scott had a bill last session, incidentally, that would have addressed a lot of the issues that we're seeing. And I'm gonna bring a little bit of politics into it because it's important to note that the Democrats in the Senate used the filibuster to kill Tim Scott's legislation that would have actually helped to address a lot of these policing issues.
Today, I lost a vote on a piece of legislation that would have led to systemic change in the relationship between the communities of color and the law enforcement community.
The case with Ahmaud Arbery of all of them was probably the most gut-wrenching of them all because it didn't even involve law enforcement at all.
The 3 South Georgia men charged with murder in the killing of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery pleaded not guilty to federal hate crime charges this afternoon.
And it was really just a tragedy what happened to him, how he lost his life. You know, I think whether you're talking about Derek Chauvin and the George Floyd situation, we see what happened with Breonna Taylor or Nat. You know, I wasn't really a fan of that decision at all.
This indictment is not going to be sufficient for a lot of the people who've been out here protesting every day, sitting here for weeks, calling for justice.
Most recent issue with Daunte Wright.
I'm going to take a break from the trial of Officer Derek Chauvin to bring you other important breaking news from a nearby suburb. CNN has now learned police officer Kim Potter is being charged in the killing of Daunte Wright.
Looking at the body cam footage, it's clearly just an accidental situation because it happened so fast, and you can actually hear the officer being like, "Oh my gosh, like, look, what did I do?" The number one thing we want to see is that people are held accountable for their actions. There is need for reform in policing, reform in training. I don't think we should be defunding police departments. I think that's actually hurts a lot of the communities, like the community I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I think we also need to take a step back and understand that our police officers engage more people, whether you're Black, white, Hispanic, in the country on a day-to-day basis. And these tragedies, which do pop up from time to time, are not indicative of policing in America.
You do think that we have a meaningful problem with officers shooting unarmed Black people, period? That it's not just a bad apple, but as the new police chief in Miami told me, it's bushels of bad apples. You do believe that, or you don't? I do not believe it's a systemic problem. I think it is a problem. And I think it's a problem that could be resolved with proper training. And that's where I think we got to go with this. This is very delicate and it's a tough subject because we have to be very clear. The vast majority of police officers in our communities serve our communities with honor and distinction. The vast majority. We do have bad apples in all police forces. We got bad apples everywhere. That's kind of a nature of things. And I don't want to diminish the point we're talking about here, but it's important to understand that our officers in the line of duty, most of them serve with honor and distinction. Congressman, you mind if I do a little rapid fire with you? Hit a couple of different issues quickly?
Give me two or three.
Great. Reparations, yes or no?
No.
Person you'd love to have dinner with who you've never had a chance to do so with, dead or alive?
Definitely Kobe Bryant.
Most talented politician in Florida?
I'm gonna go with the governor, Ron DeSantis, because he's proving it right now.
If you were a betting man, who's gonna be the 2024 nominee?
DeSantis.
What karaoke song are we getting from the congressman from Southwest Florida?
Big Papa, Notorious B.I.G. Shout out to Brooklyn.
He had to.
I love it when you call me Big Papa. Throw your hands in the air if you's a true player.
Thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Good being with you.
I completely forgot that he was not a Democrat. He felt like somebody that I knew, someone from my hood that I could relate to, and he's doing his part. Yeah. So I say good job to him.
I appreciate more so the conversation that you guys had. The way that you guys both kind of communicated. You guys listened, you challenged him. I think it would have been dope if you challenged him a little bit more and got him like a little bit heated. The same way he got heated with basketball.
I was happy to see that it was a real dialogue. One of the things I enjoyed about the conversation was it wasn't so polemic. It's nice to see a Republican that cannot go right to the mat on the first interchange.
He helped to not put all of us in a box. I don't agree with his political stance, but what he did for me is help me think outside of what I believe is true.
That was Congressman Byron Donalds. Really enjoyed getting to meet him. I see a big future for him. He's very comfortable with himself, very personable, kind of a large and in charge personality, and I like that, and I think the Republican Party likes that. But Florida is packed with big-time Republican politicians, from Ivanka Trump showing up in town, Marco Rubio, Ron DeSantis. So don't know what will happen for him next, but keep your eye on this one. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the show, and guess what? There's more like it. Make sure you subscribe, listen to our podcast if you haven't done that yet, and definitely tell your friends. I'll see you soon.